Break the stigma of men's mental health in regards to anyone who is a man, anyone who identifies as a man, or anyone who identifies as masculine or masculine qualities. We need to break this because here are some statistics about male mental health. 75% of suicides are male. 40% of men won't ask for any help during their struggle, and they feel reluctant to ask for help. 25% of men live with a mental illness. That's 1/4 of the population. Men can break down, they can cry, they can experience intense grief and loss. They're just better at hiding it. They're taught to hide it. They're taught to shame themselves for showing anything that relates to this harsh stereotype that they're taught to live. It's not unmanly to struggle. You're not weak for speaking up. You're strong and you're brave. And if you or someone you know is feeling suicidal, please call 1-800-273-8255. We need to unlearn these harsh boxes that we've implemented on males. We need to unlearn the harsh male ideal and make sure that we allow males and anyone who identifies as a male to freely create and express who they truly are without feeling shamed for veering off of the course of what is typical that a man should be. So I'm going to use this term, and I know it makes a lot of people roll their eyes, but let me explain. Societal patriarchy is very harsh on men, and what I mean by that is that in this sense, patriarchy is a very old, outdated, harmful belief system and concept as a whole, where it has been male dominated, and not only has it ostracized females or anybody outside of that male dominated mentality, it also ostracizes men who don't fit that stereotypical archetype of what a man should be. Men who express their emotions, men who exasperate some feminine qualities, men who are a little bit more in tune with emotional expression, who reach out for help, who seek out intimacy. That's typically something that is taught to men to be shameful of. And not saying that men are bad, and I'm not saying that all men are toxic. Like, that's where that term toxic masculinity comes from. Not that men are toxic, but that there has been this toxic teaching style to men of how they should be instead of letting them be who they are, if that makes sense. It's not to attack men, it is to call out the fact that earlier creators of the society, earlier ideals, old beliefs, old habits, old systems that no longer work or serve an individual, and probably didn't serve individuals back then, have shamed and oppressed people and shamed and oppressed men to be a specific way, and if they aren't that specific way, they're not worthy. So back to this, that's exactly what I mean when I say this term. So societal patriarchy tells men to be a man. Strong boys don't cry. Grow some balls. Stop acting like a girl. You're such a sissy. Real men are strong. And what they're doing and what they're entailing is that they're showing disdain towards men who are exhibiting supposed feminine qualities and qualities outside of man. And that's not good because of the fact that we are a balance of everything. Each and every one of us isn't going to be one or the other. We have masculine qualities, we have feminine qualities. No matter what our gender identification is, no matter what our gender expression is, we have a balance of both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be anything you define it to be within yourself. And it's important for us to not just push you to be one way, one right way, because there's no right way of being. It's simply allowing the person to be and make those decisions for themselves and let them express themselves in the way they are. So men are locked down into boxes and aren't taught to honor their true authentic selves or find meaningful connections or intimacy with others or trust in others. So what does this all have to do with mental health? How does this all tie in there? How do those terms tie into men's mental health? Well, it does because the incidence of suicide is significantly higher in men. Men are also less likely to reach out to professionals and loved ones when they need help. They're more likely to engage in high-risk behaviors due to the fact that everything's bottled up, and due to the fact that they aren't reached out for help. They're due to the fact that they're not taught to express themselves. It can lead to a ripple effect, especially if they already have underlying conditions to engage in high risk behaviors or to take part in dangerous activities, whether it be to others or to themselves. There's a higher risk of developing substance abuse and addiction in men as well, statistically speaking. And all of that also coincides with the fact that the life expectancy of men is actually 7 years less than it is for women or anyone who identifies as a woman. And that's scary because of the fact that typically it makes men unhealthy in their brain. It makes them unhealthy in their life because possibly all that stress, all of those emotions, all of those things do have the power to control how your physical health can be too. So if all of that accumulates, it can lead to health conditions too, and that's why it leads to a shorter life expectancy. And it's very important for us to look out for one another. It's very important for us to look out for the men in our society and to allow them to unshangle themselves from these harsh stereotypes or these harsh ideals that don't serve them. By starting a conversation around men's mental health, we also release their oppression in these boxes. We release the oppression that men or anyone who identifies as men have in these boxes, and we need to have these conversations that aren't always easy. We need to have these conversations that aren't always available. So we need to normalize men who have mental illness. We need to normalize men who ask for help. We need to normalize men who have insecurities. We need to normalize men who show their emotions and affection, who are activists or feminists, who are fighting addiction, who identify as LGBTQIA+, who are victims of domestic violence and sexual assaults. Because we need to normalize all of this, because these are the different myriad of ways and characteristics and experiences that fall into being a man. They're not always inclusive to being a woman. They're not always inclusive to being non-conforming. They're inclusive to being a man as well, or anyone who identifies as a man. We need to normalize men who are vulnerable, because vulnerability is actually a strength. It takes guts for someone to be vulnerable. So we need to normalize a man being vulnerable. We need to normalize soft, gentle, quiet men. We need to normalize any man who embodies the whole human experience. Men are allowed to cry and show emotions. Men are allowed to seek help and go to therapy. Men are allowed to feel insecure at times. Men are allowed to wear whatever they want. So even if it falls outside of the normalized man stereotype, men are allowed to wear skirts and dresses if that is who they feel they are. Men are allowed to talk about their mental health. Men are allowed to say no to sex. Men are allowed to be feminine. You know, they don't always have to be typically masculine. They can be whatever the supposed feminine qualities are. They can show that. They can be LGBTQIA. They can be gender fluid. They can have different sexual orientations. They don't always have to fit into that box that they have been bullied into all their lives. So these are some things that we need to stop saying to men, because it all starts with how we interact with each other. It all starts with how we talk to each other, because the way we speak to each other and the way we show up for each other goes a long way into our own well-being. So these are things we need to stop to saying to them is, you lost to a girl. Men should always make the first move. Man up. That's a very, very, very hard thing that I personally hate hearing someone say. Men don't cry, or why are you acting like a girl? We need to stop saying those things. We need to stop shaming men for doing things outside of that, because we need to look after their mental health, because you see the statistics. There's higher risks of the well-being in men than there are statistically in women or people who identify as women. And it all starts with the way we talk to each other. It all starts with the way we teach our boys to be. And even if you have been taught all of these things thus far, know that you can unlearn anything that isn't conducive to your growth. You can unlearn those harsh stereotypes or any harsh core beliefs or harsh pressure that has been put upon you and forced upon you, or any characteristics that are forced upon you to be. You can be anything. You can crave intimacy. You can be emotional. You can seek help. You can be feminine. You can be uninterested in sex. You can be a victim to assault. You aren't always the violent one either. There are instances where you yourself Men themselves are faced with violence within their own communities as well, and it's important to make sure that we make it a safer place for men to just be who they are, and for men to redefine what it is to be a man, and eventually break the definition in general and just be instead. So instead of asking men to toughen up, instead of asking them to be a man, be this, be that, grow this, whatever it is, instead of asking men to push themselves to be that man, we need to ask them how they're doing. We need to look out for the well-being. We need to genuinely have these conversations. We need to understand them and support them when they go outside of that typical stereotype that they should be. We need to make sure that we just show up, that we ask how they are, we show compassion, and we normalize them being compassionate and empathetic individuals. We need to make sure that we break these stereotypes, we break these barriers, and we allow the lives of everybody to just be free and just be who they are. Be who you were before they told you who to be. Keep that in mind too. Like, don't push yourself to be who everyone tells you to be. Instead, be who you truly are and ask yourself what it is for you to be a man, what it means for you to define your manhood, whether you be a man or you identify as a man. Define that. Be who you are before they told you who to be. And most importantly, look after your mental health, because of the fact that it all starts with how we teach each other how to be. It all starts with how we talk to each other. And it all starts on what we normalize and what we choose to normalize. And we need to break the stigma of what happens to your mental health when you are talked to in a harsh way, or when you are forced into ideals that are not productive for your own nourishment, well-being, mental health, and growth. I hope this video has been helpful. Have a great mental health day. Thank you.